I think that all of us have experienced that one sad moment in a video game that just kind of broke us. Whether it's the unfortunate end of a loving character or the destruction of a beautiful world, it's undeniable that some video game moments leave an emotional scar on our soul. But it's a scar that most rarely think about because it honestly kind of sucks to review an old memory of a heartbreaking ending. Rest in peace, my guy. Rest in peace. It's true that no good story is complete without its fair share of sad moments, since a piece of fiction is best when it plays with as many of our human emotions as possible, and sadness is a very important one to include. But what is the arguably best way to implement this emotion into a video game? Well, I have a game that does it in a great way, but before talking about it, I first want to focus on the different ways sadness is portrayed in other video games and how some approaches hit harder than others. Starting off by talking about Sifu, I first have to say, I know that I just made a video on this game and will also talk about the same games I covered in that video. Why am I doing this, you might ask? Well, I just got a new PC and haven't played many games on it, meaning that there's less source material for making these videos, and I'm also trying to have a normal life, so please bear with me on this part. Now, the sadness in Sifu is primarily shown through the character's actions. You have the main villain Yang, who in an attempt to claim what the game calls talismans ends up killing your father/master. Now, this is a very emotional moment for our main character, but since we barely get to know Sifu as a person, he isn't the main focus of this game's sadness. That role falls onto our unnamed protagonist. Fueled by primarily anger and revenge, we set out to kill the 5 talisman holders in their respected levels. And we as the player do not care about the damage we inflict onto the enemies, since they are in the way of us achieving our goal. And this strategy of using violence and lethal fatalities ends up working right until we kill the final member Yang. We are afterwards rewarded with this cutscene that tells us the truth about our adventure. That we at the end of the day was the bad guy. What's even more sad is that we as the player feel responsible for this tragic ending, since we were the ones controlling this anger and revenge driven individual. It's clear from the start of the game that what we are doing is morally wrong. Combine that with the horrible goal we have in mind and you got yourself a sad story about revenge. But not many of us think that Sifu is a sad video game, because the few sad moments we experience in it are either quickly forgotten about or get overlooked by the core gameplay loop. Because this is first of all an action fighting game, not a deep emotional roller coaster. Or in other words, sadness in Sifu is nothing but a motive for our character's actions. And it's only until the big reveal, if you got the bad ending, that you feel the sadness that has been accumulating throughout the adventure. Moving on to Control, there are some similarities between it and Sifu when we talk about sadness. You, just like in Sifu, experience loss, this time in the form of your missing brother. Where the two games begin to differentiate from one another is that you not only in Control have the ability to save your brother, but also have to deal with the paranatural entity known as the Hiss. Now, without going into any details about what the Hiss actually is, it's the reason why we as the protagonist have to kill anyone infected by it. But rather than killing normal humans like in Sifu, we instead go up against zombie-like creatures. While this doesn't change the fact that we are killing people, it for some reason feels morally acceptable because they are technically no longer human beings, and we therefore don't feel the same kind of sadness when ending their lives. On top of that, just like in Sifu, the emotion of sadness once again gets subdued by the action-packed gameplay, the interesting story and the interactions we have with the characters. Yes, there are a few moments where the game uses sadness to its advantage and as a narrative driving force, but it's once again not the main focus. Another part to put into consideration when talking about emotions are sounds, or in this case music. And due to Control being a horror game to a certain degree, the music that plays in it also tries to invoke a feeling of horror. This means that the music for a majority of the time leans towards an intimidating and nerve-wracking tone to further incentivize the feeling of horror, not sadness. But what if we take a look at a game like Hollow Knight Silksong, which does show its sadness through something like music and level design? Now, the world of Farloom is depressing, to say the least. A once complete kingdom now reduced to nothing but ruins with a dying society. Silksong is a visually stunning game, and a large amount of the sadness that's present in it is shown through its world design. You can almost begin to imagine as you ascend the land of Farloom what this place must have looked like in its prime. This citadel would not be the forgotten mess it is today. Shellwood wouldn't be overpopulated by vegetation. Bilewater would probably still be the Pilewater we all know and love. This also applies to a lot of the characters we meet or fight against in the game. Where I think a lot of us begin to not care about this sad, crumbling world is when we take our primary goal into consideration. We as Hornet know that there is no hope for this kingdom to return to its former glory, meaning that there's no reason to think about rebuilding it. And with the goal of slaying the current monarch, there's also no reason to try and save the mind-controlled creatures of Farloom, because they can only be saved if we first take care of Grandmother Silk. So we don't really think about this dying world, even though we spend the entire game exploring it, because it gets overshadowed by our ultimate goal, a sick boss fight or a friendly character. But what about the music? Well, the music in Silksong is utilized primarily in two different ways. It's either used to replicate the feeling of the environment or to set the tone of a fight. This means that there's a good blend of music spanning over multiple genres to fit the vibe. The only problem is that there aren't many sad moments in Silksong, at least not moments that encourage a change of music. And even when you finally stumble upon a genuinely sad moment, it's usually the music that makes it less sad. Now, I think that all of us have a pretty good understanding of how different video games implement sadness in their own respected way. So I would like to introduce you to a game that portrays sadness in its own unique way, while also showing it through the other ways I have already talked about. I present to you Undying. For any of you who don't know what this game is about, I'll give a quick summary of the story. In a world where a zombie outbreak has occurred, you take the role of Angling, who together with her son Cody tries to find a way to what the game calls the safe zone. As they are being transported from one place to another, they get ambushed by zombies, resulting in one of them biting Angling, infecting her in the process. The two instantly rush home, where they must now on their own and with the intel from others find a way to the safe zone. So with all of this intro stuff out of the way, let's pick this game apart and see what we discover. I first want to take a look at some of the mechanics, because I think they do a pretty good job of showing the mother's declining health. You of course, like in almost every other zombie apocalypse game, have a health, food and water meter that must be kept as full as possible if you want to survive. On top of that, you also at some point after each night need to choose a symptom that lasts for a specific amount of time. And these symptoms can range from small inconveniences to downright horrible mechanics. This means that you are watching Angling getting weaker and weaker with each passing day. Combine that with the fact that she needs to take care of Cody just makes it even more sad. She coughs more, her combat abilities worsen, and she ends up becoming a liability that increasingly gets more difficult to protect. And with the limited amount of resources at your disposal, you have to make clever decisions on where to go and who to talk to. Because your own time is limited, and in a world where humans show their real emotions due to each of their lives being on the line, you have to figure out who you can trust and who you cannot. Another thing this game takes advantage of when it comes to invoking a feeling of sadness is that you are not alone on this adventure. Just try to imagine how terrible it would be for a child to grow up in a world like this. Each and every day, Cody is either forced to fight against zombified humans or hide away from them while his mother takes care of them. He sees how people treat one another when society falls apart, and even witness the end of those he cares about. These are all things that a child should never have to see, yet it's an unavoidable part of the world he lives in. You cannot feel anything but sympathy for this kid, since he's just trying to survive with his mother and only wishes to live a normal life away from the zombies. But it gets even worse than this. As I said before, your time playing as Angling is limited, because you are, no matter what you do, dead when this game ends. And even though you throughout the game try to find a cure or an escape route where both of our main characters survive, it's sadly impossible. The core gameplay loop of Undying is also just sad when you put it into perspective. All you basically do in this game is collect resources, talk to people, fight zombies or other humans, make food, water and items, teach Cody as many things as possible because you can't even read due to a symptom, and of course also pretend that everything is okay. That is the real sad truth of this gameplay loop. It's simple, repetitive and kind of boring like real life. Okay, that last part was maybe a bit of an exaggeration. Shifting focus from the core gameplay mechanics, I now want to talk about a few sad moments that just hits differently the first time you see them. With the first one being the unfortunate end of Diana. Now, you meet this character pretty early on, where you must help her get rid of a few zombies before she gets the courage to crawl out of her hiding spot. At first glance, she seems very friendly and even gives us information about a survivors camp where we are more than welcome to visit. As we do so, we get introduced to the camp's leader, Noah. Now, all of the people living in this camp, aside from a few exceptions, think that Noah is God's chosen son and therefore follow his way of leadership, which consists of taking every single item that gets collected from expeditions and then handing them out evenly amongst the people. This is fine. What's not fine is when Diana one day gets injured and afterwards goes missing, only for this child Lila to say that Noah is the culprit. You instantly think to yourself, okay, we just get this guy out of the way, sneak into Noah's home and get Diana out of there. Oh, how very wrong you are. But instead of saying what happens, I think it's best to just show you what we find down here.
Cody!
Pure sadness. Seeing one of the kindest people you have met up until this part missing both her legs and being tied up like this is just heartbreaking. And the dialogue following the fight you have with Noah also just shows that you are living in a kill or be killed world, where the weak gets disposed of so the healthy can continue living. You afterwards have the ability to end Noah's life or exile him from the camp. The choice ultimately doesn't matter since you don't see him for the rest of the game. The other soul-crushing moment I want to share with you is the death of Cody's father. You throughout the game see flashbacks of him talking to Angling or receive phone calls from him during the night. The core message that these phone calls are trying to tell the player is that the family wants to be reunited and find a way to safety together. But as you get closer to the end of the game, you receive an urgent phone call from Jacob telling the two that he needs their help and tells them to find him in a forest. You go to the place and discover that Jacob is nowhere to be seen, because he's already passed on. After the countless amounts of phone calls you had received from him promising that everything will be okay, you can only sit there and accept the reality of the situation, that he's never coming back. A thing I have neglected to talk about up until now are the voice lines you hear from the characters during each conversation. Now, each line of dialogue is not voiced in this game, which is always a bit of a shame. But then again, this is an indie game, so I think that justifies it. You still have sounds coming from the characters whenever they speak, and it's moments like discovering that Jacob is dead that you can actually hear the emotions spilling out of the characters. Combine this with the visuals and you get a truly heartbreaking moment. And these are just a few examples of the many characters you witness the end of throughout this adventure. Not all of them are equally impactful, but the cinematic cutscenes do a really good job of showing us the brutality of these deaths. And listening to any character's final words before dying always makes the situation more emotional, even if they aren't the best human being. So what's almost left to talk about at this point? We have gone over various impactful scenes and have accepted the sad reality of Angling's fate. But what about the music? The language that can make us feel all types of emotions without uttering a single word. Well, in contrast to the other games where there's a pretty consistent change of music and genre, it's a bit different in Undying. Because the music in this game has one primary purpose, which is to make us feel sad. And in some moments also make us feel threatened, but mostly the first thing. This means that pretty much every single song that plays at each location has this feeling of sadness, because the music mimics the state of the world. It doesn't matter if you're at home, inside a forest or stuck in a prison, it's the same sad violin playing in the background. And even when you experience a happy moment, the music still carries this sad vibe to remind you that the rest of the world is still dangerous and full of cruelty. Even when you find information about a potential way to escape, or make a friend that actually cares about you, it's never enough for a change of music. Hell, even when you're in a different dimension where you have to make a crucial decision, you are still followed by the music all the way to the end of the game. The music is, in other words, the undying message of the world's sadness. It's no secret that video games with a compelling story need to implement different types of emotions into its core in order to create a good experience. And the first 3 games I talked about in this video live up to this task in their own respected ways. They use a wide range of human emotions in their stories to appeal to as big of an audience as possible. Where I think Undying triumphs over these games when it comes to storytelling is with its focus on one specific emotion. It's due to this primary focus point that the game will appeal to less people compared to the other more popular titles. The good thing about this is if you're one of those few people who enjoys playing a game of this genre, where the story revolves around one key emotion. Yes, you will not experience a super deep masterpiece, but instead a simple story about a mother, her son, and them trying to escape from a zombie-infested world. It's an experience I can only recommend that all of you try because of its perfect representation of sadness. Hi everyone, I want to thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end and hope you would consider giving it a like or my channel a sub, it would mean the world to me. As always, if I have forgotten to talk about something important, then please leave a comment about it down below. I hope you have a great day and or night, and until we meet again, bye bye.